There are people that say that money doesn't buy happiness. That is half true, but it's only a half truth. Welcome to the Struggle and Strive podcast. My name is Esther Wallace. I am your host, and today we have an exciting day. We are going to talk about career and finances. We're just going to cover some subjects that are sort of foundational for career and finance for those of you that are just getting started in your careers, or those of you that have plateaued in your careers, or those of you that are still working a job, which I really want to talk a lot about, and feel like you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants and your financial future doesn't have a lot of direction or intention. I really want to speak to that. Before we get into all this stuff, I want you to know that I am a high school dropout. Most of what I'm going to share with you, I've read in books and experimented with in my own life. I do not have a college degree in any field. I did not come up with not a single one of these strategies or tactics that I'm going to share with you on my own. Results will vary. I don't have all the answers by any stretch. Why am I doing this? I'll share with you that a lot of people come to me very, very often and ask me, what do I do for a living? What should I invest in? What degree should I study for? People ask me which way to turn in their careers, how to start a business, what kind of side hustle would work for me. I get these types of questions constantly. I got to tell you, it's not that I'm super smart, but there is a lot of interest from everyone I encounter on this subject. And to be 100% transparent, I'm very interested in the subject myself. I've read dozens of books on the subject. Speaking of which, I am going to post a list of about 8 or 10, I think, that are pretty strong foundational books in the study guide. Oh, that reminds me, there's a study guide. If you don't have one for this yet, go over to struggleandstrive.co and you should be able to find the series on career and finances and get your free study guide. When I say free, you don't have to do anything to get it except go over there and download it. So you might be asking, does this dude even know what he's talking about? Well, I'm going to leave that for you, the listener / watcher, viewer, to decide. Here we go. My wife and I no longer need to work. I am 47. She is 39. We no longer need to work. Our income continues whether we show up to offices or not. We are in the top 1% of household incomes in the United States. We own multiple businesses. We own stocks, crypto, real estate. We live where we want to live. We drive what we want to drive. We travel extensively. We are able to homeschool our children. We spend a significant portion of our time having adventures and building memories, with our family, with our children. I want to start by telling you how I became fascinated with this subject. If you've watched any of my other stuff, you know that I'm in recovery. I found recovery when I was 26 years old. By the time I was 27, almost 28, I had a year of continuous sobriety. And I had gone from moving furniture to my second job, which was repossessing cars, believe it or not. It was pretty sketch. I only did that for a short time. And my third job, which was when I was about a year, maybe 15 months sober, I got a job in an office. And wearing donated clothing, like I only had a couple of button-down shirts and I had to wash them all the time and try to look presentable. But what happened to me when I worked in that office is I didn't directly report to the CEO, but the CEO was very friendly with me. He was a co-founder of the company and he was a millionaire and he was only 2.5 years older than me. So here I am, 20, almost 28, and he's 30 or 31. And I had never known anybody in close proximity to me that was wealthy. Not really. That being said, my view on money was very limited. My view on wealth was very limited. I was under, some weird assumptions that I needed to get good grades and then I needed to get a good job, at a big corporation and, hopefully work my way up. And that's not been my experience. Let's go back to my relationship with this guy. He was very accessible to me, and I would ask him questions like, "How did you start this company? How did you think of it? How do you handle your taxes?" And after a few questions, this guy goes, "Listen. have you read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, yet by Robert Kiyosaki? And I said, no, I think I've heard of it before. And he says, well, why don't you read that book, take some notes, and anything you want to discuss, why don't you write down a new list of questions based on what you've read, and then I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we'll sit down and I'll answer all of your questions. So this guy turned me on to this whole other way of looking at money, at wealth creation, at my work life. And when I read that book and I got questions answered by my new mentor, I didn't realize it maybe in the moment, but it changed the whole way I operated. And it wasn't overnight. At least in the moment, it didn't feel like it was overnight. When I look back, I worked for that guy for 2 years, and when I left that job, and I made $27,000 a year working there, and I got an excellent education for $0 working there. And when I left there, I started my very first company. It was a very small company, and in the business world doesn't amount to much. But I went from making $27,000 a year to making $105,000 a year the very next year. So for me, it was a massive increase. It was a massive change in lifestyle, and that's sort of where I'm focusing this series and its energy. I want to speak to those of you that are scratching your heads and scouring the internet and trying to figure out what you should do if you want to make more, if you want to have more freedom and independence financially. There are people that say that money doesn't buy happiness. That is half true, but it's only a half truth. It is absolutely true that the things that bring me the most satisfaction in my life have to do with the service work I do with other men, helping them find recovery, helping them find God, the time I spend with my wife, and most notably the time I spend with my children. Those things bring me the most satisfaction of anything I do in life. But there has been a lot of study around happiness and finances. And there have been some very conclusive studies, and what they've shown is that there's a massive increase in people's well-being between like $75,000 and $110,000 a year, and that continues all the way up until about $500,000 a year. So, and it sort of caps out in that region. So if you think that money will solve your problems, it will solve a lot of problems. There's a guy in one of the books I've read that says, if money can solve your problem, it's not a problem. See, there are real problems in the world that people are dealing with, and money can't fix those. So money solves a lot of challenges. And for a person, especially for a man who is a provider and who is struggling to, say, make $50,000, $60,000 a year and is supporting a wife and children and wants to put away for retirement and isn't sure where to invest, doesn't have a lot to invest, that's a very tough position to be in. So let's get into the meat of what this particular video is going to be about. And what we're going to talk about today is profits versus wages. All right. The difference between profits and wages is the difference between working for money and having money work for you. Wages are what you earn when you trade your time for money. Okay, you're taking your time, your labor, and you're trading that for money. It's valuable, right? Some people get traded more money for their time based on their skill level or their skill stack or the credentials behind their name. For example, a nurse practitioner is going to garner a much higher hourly wage or salary than will a new guy at Chipotle. So it's not like it doesn't have value. It does. It absolutely does. And if you're not working, by all means, go get a job today doing anything. You should be generating revenue for your home. That's what I believe. But however valuable, it is limited to the hours in your day, your month, or your life. So it is limited. Profits, on the other hand, come from creating value and trading it directly to the marketplace and retaining the excess. The excess is what we call profit. That, while can take time, time isn't the main factor. So here's an example. Think about a doctor working in a hospital. This gal, she's paid better than most people. right? Or many people anyway. But make no mistake about it, she has a job. If she stops working at the hospital, her boss is going to stop paying her. Now, if this same doctor opens up a private practice, right now she's in business for herself. She's got no boss. She is creating value and trading it directly to the market. So she's taking a profit, hopefully. She's taking all the associated risks with business ownership, but she's really if she's seeing all the patients and she's submitting all the billing, what she really has is she's basically built a job. So she doesn't have a boss, but similarly to having a boss, if she stops working, the profits stop coming in, the revenue stops coming in. Then let's go another step further. If she creates a larger practice where she employs other doctors and physicians assistants, et cetera, and she employs a billing department, she now has a system, the system that creates wealth for her, whether she's going into the office or not. This is a big distinction. This is a business. It's a cash flowing asset on her personal financial sheet. Now, if she takes the profits, we're going to go another step further. If she takes the profits from her company or any revenue that she's got that is in excess, and she invests that, right? Any kind of income producing assets, whether they're appreciating or cash flowing. So let's say she takes that and she starts buying up cryptocurrency and she buys a rental property. Now she's an investor. She can be both. And that, investors, what they're doing now is they're stacking up income producing assets. And if she's not working at the practice, her work in this example could be continuing to search out and purchase cash flowing or appreciating valuable assets and stacking them together. That becomes the work of an investor. Now, I pulled all this from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Thank you, Mr. Kiyosaki. So let's break down the example I gave you in four. He calls it the cash flow quadrant. You can Google this. I would highly recommend you read his book, The Cash Flow Quadrant. So let's talk about it. The first is an employee. An employee has a job, trades time for money. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Plenty of honor in that. The second one, self-employed, owns a job, creates value, and trades it for money. Third category, business owner, owns a system. The system creates value and has a team that trades it for money. 4 is an investor, owns investments, accumulates assets that appreciate in value and or cash flow. Make sense so far? This is where we want to begin our journey with some definitions. We want to kind of work out of the cash flow quadrant, make some decisions about where am I today, where would I like to be, where do I see myself potentially going in the future. When thinking about financial freedom, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I want to encourage you to take some time and sit quietly or with your spouse and come up with what you think your financial future could or should or ought to look like. And that way you can come up with some goals, really understanding what financial freedom means for you specifically is really, really important. I've asked many people, how much money do you want to make? And they say, I don't know. Well, I don't know is not a very directional or intentional answer. And there is, like we already discussed, there's sort of a limit on how much income will change your life in a meaningful, deep, significant way. It will buy a lot of comforts. I think most notably, it can buy you time. So I can tell you, I'll give you an example. How about that? An example of financial freedom for a person could be, today I make $50,000 a year, let's say, and I'm barely getting by. So I would like to make, let's call it $180,000 to $100,000 a year to cover my regular monthly expenses, my mortgage, tuition for my kids, food, that sort of thing, all the basics so that I can keep the lights on, keep everything turning, and drive a relatively new car with low miles. My spouse can have a car, that sort of thing. And in order for us to really feel wealthy, let's add another $100,000 to that. per year so that I could use that to invest in other cash flowing assets. I could use it to take a couple of real significant trips with my family, and we could really afford to be a helpful support within our community, whether that's to local nonprofits, whether that's to my church, to wherever you feel called to give. So if in my mind I've decided, I want to 4x my income, $200,000 a year. If I could get to $200,000 a year and do it passively, and when I say passively, that's not like I don't even want to use that as a blanket term. It doesn't mean with no effort. I mean, if I can build systems or own assets that throw off roughly $200,000 a year that require, let's call it 10 hours a week or less of my management and monitoring, I would consider that fairly passive. So if I can generate something like $200,000 a year passively, I'm not working 40-hour weeks, I would consider myself very wealthy. I have the opportunity to spend more time with my family, to travel, to invest, to support my community. All my needs are met. A lot of my wants are met. And with an extra 30 hours of what for most people is scheduled work time per week, I mean, I can spend that time learning how to generate more revenue. I can use it volunteering my time. I can use it any way I want. That's when I'm talking about freedom and figuring out what your number is. And, because people have asked me a bunch of times, like, what's your number? Like, what's the number when you quit working or when you, fill in the blank, when you've arrived or whatever. And first of all, for everyone, it's different. And second of all, that number really has to do with, are my needs being met? Are a lot of our desires within reach? And am I not killing myself, putting myself in an early grave accomplishing this? And if those things line up for you, if you can passively generate enough revenue to keep your family afloat and aspire to greater things, you're rich AF as far as I'm concerned. Honestly, I know people that break their backs. They work 60, 70 hours a week to climb from $60,000 a year to $80,000 a year. And much respect to all those people. But if your question for me is how do I achieve, financial freedom, this is an example. Figure out with your partner, or if you're alone by yourself, how much money do I need? How much money would I like to have? And then formulate how can I accomplish that on an annual basis with relatively small amounts of work. Because it's not about working harder. It's great to have good work ethic. I believe I have as strong a work ethic as most any people, but that isn't the only element to that leads you straight to wealth. There are a lot of things that we're going to cover. Profits versus wages is sort of a fundamental keystone of this structure. And I hope that by this time, you've got a bit of an understanding. And in the next couple of videos, we're going to unpack some more foundational principles of career in finance.